Hey everybody, welcome back to my shop. I've come down with a really bad cold this week, so I haven't really had the energy to do a regular turning project, so I thought instead maybe I'd show you how I sharpen my main gouges. But please remember, this is not an instructional video, and it is meant for entertainment purposes only. Your safety is your responsibility. Well, let's get started. Let's start out with the most popular bull gouge grind of today. The swept-back grind, also known as the Ellsworth grind, or the Irish grind, O'Neill grind, whatever you want to call it. And this grind is formed using a jig system. Now, I prefer to use the one-way vary grind system. Now, there are three important settings we have to set up before we start grinding. Number one is the angle of the arm that comes out of the jig system. I like to use the very bottom detent on the vary grind system. And if you use various settings, depending on how you run your tooling, just set a little pin here on the corner of your grinding area, so you can just slot it into that little detent, slide the arm over, lock her down. Now that'll be 100% accurate every single time. Now the second setting we have to worry about is how much the tool protrudes out of the jig system. So I like to have 2 inches of protrusion, so I have a little stop block set here on my table. So I just slide the bull gouge straight up to it, slide the grinding jig up to the edge of the table, lock her down, and now I got 2 inches every single time. Repeatability is very important. Now the third setting we have to worry about is the position of this pivot point in relation to the wheel. It has to be a very specific distance from the dead center of the wheel down, and it also has to be a very specific distance set from the face of the wheel out to that pivot point. So all manufacturers will give you some sort of suggestion for that, and if you've made your own jig system, just follow the David Ellsworth numbers. Since I have a CBN grinding wheel, cubic boron nitrate, my wheel I don't have to dress and it never reduces in size. So I actually just put a little line on my arm so that whenever I slide it back into the jig system, as long as I put it to that line, it'll always be the same distance out. If you have the money for CBN, please invest in it. It sharpens the tools much cooler, it produces much less sparks, which is handy in a wood shop, and they basically never wear out. So it may be a lot more cost up front, but long term, it actually works out better. Okay, so now that we have all the settings set properly, we can start grinding. I find this is the safest way to grind it. So we're going to set the vary grind or the jig into the pocket, and we're going to keep the jig parallel to the face of the wheel to start. So we'll lay it flat, light pressure, don't push on it, light pressure. I first like to push the handle downward slightly, and that'll relieve this top corner over here, which can be a little catchy. By the way, please excuse my dry hands. I was pouring concrete earlier this week and I hate wearing gloves to do it. So, flat, down a little bit, and then bring it back up to center. Don't try to continue all the way over, because if you screw up and that tool falls off the wheel, this edge of the wheel will pull that tool in, you'll destroy your wheel, and probably get injured at the same time. So, only from the bottom up. Again, flat, down, up. Always keep your hand on the jig and choke up on the tool. If you go down to the end of the handle, it's going to get a little bit awkward. You want maximum control. So let's do the other side. Flat on the wheel, small dip, bring it back up to center. Now we're nice and sharp. Also note that the wing is slightly convexed. If it's concave, you're spending a little bit too much time on the center of the wing, and it'll be very hard to use for shear scraping, and it won't cut as efficiently. Also, I always like to relieve the heel on the backside after grinding, so that when you're making cuts, this back heel won't be leaving a big burnishing mark right behind the nice fresh clean cut. I mostly use this grind for roughing out bowls because of its long wing, so I can take really heavy roughing cuts, and also it's the best tool for shear scraping. Some people have a little bit less of a swept back grind, but I use this swept back grind for very specific purposes. It is not an all-purpose tool for me. The next gouge we're going to sharpen is my favorite, the 40-40 grind bull gouge. I first learned about this from a video on YouTube called Stuart, Batty, How Gouges Cut. Please check it out. I'll link it in the description down below. It'll really open your eyes into how all the mechanics of these tools work. But basically what the 40-40 means is that we're setting the tool rest to 40 degrees off the wheel so that we get a 40-degree angle sharpened all the way around the gouge. And also we're going to swing the gouge out to 40 degrees off the wheel. 40 degrees meaning this is 0, there's 40. These two lines here are actually at 45, so I'm going to have them just out of that. Now, if you are reshaping a gouge into a 40-40 grind, all you need to do is first lay it flat on its flutes upside down and grind it until you have eliminated all the previous edge. Waldt recently reshaped a swept-back grind using that method, so I'm going to link him down in the description down below as well, so please check out that video and it should help you out. Now, before we start sharpening, I want to explain the flute a little further. Each bowl gouge always has a bottom rounded section down here, but it's also got these wings out here. Now, the goal in sharpening the 40-40 gouge is that we must keep whatever part of the flute we're sharpening parallel to the tool rest. So let's get started and I'll show you what I mean. So start the grinder up. So as Stuart Batty says, to achieve this we need to swing for the wings and twist for the flute. What we're going to start with is by setting the tool 40 degrees off the wheel. This is 90, this is 0. So here's 40. Next thing is we got to make sure the flute is parallel to the tool rest. Open like this, the flute is pointing away. Closed like that, the flute is pointing into the tool rest, so it's not parallel. There's parallel, where it's on the exact same flat plane. So, 40 degrees, flute parallel to the tool rest. Let's grind the wing. And then we're going to swing the handle while twisting the flute so that the flute of the tool is always parallel to the tool rest. Let's do the left side. 40 degrees, flute parallel to the tool rest, grind the wing, and swing the handle while twisting the flute. Now, I don't think I've got one perfect single bevel on that grind because the camera's a little bit in my way, so it's quite awkward. But the end result is that the tool is 40 degrees this way, and this way. It's not 90, it's not 0, it's 40 back this way. And that makes for a very efficient cutting gouge. I would say it's also the most agile grind, allowing you to make fine detail work, but it also cuts the cleanest. And it's all due to those mechanics of the 40-40. Again, please check out Stuart Batty's video, linked down below, and it'll make a lot more sense than leaving mine off. Next we're going to sharpen the standard spindle gouge. Now, I used to use the Vari-Grind system at a lower detent. Here is the bowl, here is what I used to use for spindle. But I find that actually platform sharpening provides a better, more efficient grind for both spindle turning and the end grain hollowing. I use the tool rest at 40 degrees, which is convenient because that's the same angle I use for the 40-40 grind bowl gouge, so I don't have to change it back and forth very often. And when I sharpen this spindle gouge, I start at 90, and then we're going to swing the handle out while closing the flute. The flute will end up about 45, maybe 50 degrees closed compared to this rest, and it'll be about, I would say, about 30-35 degrees off of the wheel. So if this was 0, they'd be about 30-35 degrees. So we'll start with the nose, and then we're going to swing it while closing. Come back around, swing while closing, and there we go. Again, it's pretty hard with the camera kind of in my standing position, but I think you get the point. Now, the main thing to remember about really all three gouges is that these points on the wings must all be equal with each other. If you've got one wing that's coming down here and one wing that's way up there, you're not going to have a very efficient cutting tool. So that's one way to see if you're actually grinding even enough. Thanks for tuning into this week's video. If you found the video helpful, please click the like button and share it with whoever else might need it. If you have any questions or suggestions for me, please fire those off in the comments section down below. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. I'll have a new video out every Friday. So thank you very much, have yourself a great day, and God bless.